The primary way of conveying story and character in Fire Emblem is obviously dialogue. Support conversations, chapter cutscenes, recruitment conversations, they all play a huge role in fleshing out the world and the people in it. What I find just as compelling is how Fire Emblem uses its mechanics to tell stories. Things like skills, growth rates, inventory, and gameplay scenarios. While these systems have the upside of making the games more fun and engaging, they can also be used deliberately to reflect the character's background, personality, and relationships. A lot of the times, these mechanics convey details that the story never says out loud. In this video, I'll be highlighting some of my favorite examples of this kind of storytelling, cases where gameplay choices quietly reveal character arcs, world-building details, or even entire plot twists. Of course, I can't make a comprehensive list, so I would encourage you to share some other examples I missed. Some of these are well known, others are more speculative, but they all show how Fire Emblem rewards players who are willing to read between the lines. Or, I guess I'm not talking about dialogue, so it's not really between the lines. Real quick, my videos have been getting a lot more views lately. That anyone cares what I think about Fire Emblem is really cool to me. I've spent the last decade since I've gotten into this series with these thoughts just haunting my mind, and every YouTuber on Earth says that you should ask people to subscribe in the video, so please like, comment, and subscribe. I have no marketable skills other than knowing how to pronounce Nisha, so it'd be great if this worked out for me. I think the most easily identifiable mechanic used to express character is the skill system. Especially since Fates introduced personal skills for every character, it's become a really intuitive way to tie someone's personality into how they function on the battlefield. Lorenz likes being in leadership roles, so he deals more damage when assigned a battalion. Ash grew up stealing to survive, so he has Lock Touch. Takumi has a complex, so he deals more damage when paired with someone of a higher level. I'm not going to explain every single one, partly because that would take forever, and also you probably don't need me to explain some of these. However, in true elitist fashion, my favorite use of skills to express character comes from Fire Emblem Thracia's 776. In the usual games, the Astra skill is tied to the Isaacian royal family, with only descendants of Ode being able to inherit or learn it. If you know this bit of lore, it might cause you to already be suspicious of Gallus' heritage, even before Raedric gets to his exposition dump. What's even cooler is Merida. It's already heavily implied that she has ties to Isaac, but her ability to learn Astra from Shanam, who doesn't actually know the skill himself, is basically the nail in the coffin. Despite being completely unaware of her lineage, her gameplay reflects it. Her heritage isn't just background lore, it's alive in her skill set, shaping how she plays long before she herself is aware of it. The skills having a deeper connection to the character's story makes them feel like a multi-dimensional mechanic. They're not only relevant to gameplay. While they create unit variety, they also deepen character writing and world building. In some particularly subtle instances, they can feel like rewards for players who are paying attention, and they show how Fire Emblem's mechanics can do just as much storytelling as its dialogue. When Karel joins you at the end of FE6, he seems like a joke character. He has by far the highest growth rates in the series, with a minimum of 100% in each stat. However, he's a level 19 Swordmaster, meaning he only gets one level up. While he might initially seem like a unit thrown in just to support the bases of a gross crowd, I think Karel's design is actually a symbolic representation of his character arc. As a young man, Karel was a bloodthirsty warrior, obsessed with strength and combat. He killed multiple members of his own family, and burned bridges with his only surviving sister. Later in life, by the time of FE6, he had changed his ways. He no longer fought just for the thrill, but to protect what little family he had left. However, his redemption came too late. Carla had already died, and he was estranged from both fear and barter. Despite that, he still tries to do good with what little life he has left. We can see this in his supports with Fear and Rutger, where he teaches them swordplay while also trying to guide them away from the path he once led. He's no longer one note, driven only by bloodlust. He's become a more complex, grounded figure with a dignified sense of purpose. This ties well into his gameplay design. He has enormous potential, but very little time left to realize it. He's spent a lifetime going awry, but by the time he's matured and ready to do something meaningful, the end is already near. That message comes across to the players, even if only subconsciously. Yeah, they're not going to think this perfect level up is a metaphor for how he was a troubled youth who's grown and is only now ready to achieve his full potential, but they will think, wow, this guy would be amazing if he weren't already at the level cap. Karel's design in FE6 masterfully blends gameplay and storytelling. His near-max level and over-the-top growth rates represent the tragedy of self-discovery arriving too late. He's no longer the monster he once was, but the world has moved on, and there is only so much he can do to set things right. The potential to blend mechanics and character depth is part of what makes Fire Emblem so compelling to me, and what makes Karel's arc surprisingly poignant for a unit most players will never seriously use. Fina is a character with very little presence. She's a dancer from Warren who got separated from her troop and lost in an abandoned-infested forest. She saved Navarre, she calls him ugly, and that's it. What's interesting about her is her weapon, the rapier. In Arcanea and most of Fire Emblem, the rapier can only be used by members of the nobility. This implies that, despite her current standing, she's of noble birth. I feel like this shows the amount of attention to detail given to characters, even in the older games. I think a lot of people write off these older casts as kind of generic with not much thought put into them, but that's not the case. They did care, they did try to enrich these characters however they could, it's just not always the most visible. The idea of a character's starting inventory being used to convey backstory is greatly expanded upon in Fire Emblem Awakening with Libra. He's introduced in the brand new War Monk class and joins with Amend, Ward, and the Killer Axe. Based on his staves and serene design, the killer axe feels out of place. Liber appears to be a holy man through and through, so why is he wielding one of the most brutal and brash weapons in the series? This contrast is a clue about his inner struggle. Liber is a character defined by duality. One half of his class is devoted to healing and protecting, while the other is centered around violence and destruction. He prays for the safety of his allies, which by extension means he's also praying for the demise of their enemies. He devotes himself to charitable work, but internally he wrestles with the belief that it's all a facade, that he doesn't truly deserve the peace he tries to spread. In this way, the killer axe is a representation of his inner demons. It represents the part of Liber he tried to keep hidden, the part that engages in violence even though it contradicts his ideals. The axe, paired with the healing saves, encapsulates the paradox of a man trying to do good in a world where goodness alone doesn't win wars. Libra's starting inventory is a good example of how Fire Emblem uses gameplay to reflect character. Rather than relying solely on dialogue or support conversations, the game uses the simple trait of his starting equipment to plant the seed of a bigger story. It's quiet storytelling that turns a throwaway detail into a window into his soul. Keeping with the theme of equipment being used to tell a story, Dyrmit joins with the Beoblade. This sword is only usable by the descendants of Beowulf, and the characters who can and can't use it convey a surprising amount of story. Firstly, within FE5's canon, Nanna is Finn's daughter. Based on the rules established in FE4, you would then expect Dyrmit to be Finn's son, but he clearly isn't. This is a payoff to a conflict set up all the way back in the lovers' conversation between Loxus and Beowulf in Chapter 5 of FE4. Here, Beowulf confronts Loxus about her having feelings for someone else and tells her to go be with him instead. While I wouldn't blame you if you thought he was referencing Eldigan, the implication here is that he was likely talking about Finn. The specific timeline is unclear, but here's how it reads to me. Loxus had some kind of affair involving Finn and Beowulf. She then had Dyrmit sometime during chapters 3 or 4. Afterward, Beowulf found out about it and confronted her during chapter 5. She then went to Leonster to be with Finn and gave birth to Nanna shortly after the Valhalla massacre. While bits and pieces of this story can be gathered through various conversations across the usual games, it all comes together with Dyrmit being able to use the Beoblade and not Nanna. Interestingly, there's another character who can wield this weapon, Fergus. He's older than both Dyrmit and Nanna, and seems completely unaware that he and Dyrmit might be half-brothers. This adds another layer to Beowulf's character, implying Fergus may be the result of a fling long before he even met Loxus. Also, since Fergus can wield the Bragi blade, his mother must have holy blood. Beowulf really got around. It's impressive how much narrative is packed into just one weapon. The Beoblade doesn't just tell us who Beowulf's descendants are, it reveals hidden relationships, fills in gaps in the plot, and adds unexpected depth to minor characters such as Fergus. It's a perfect example of how Fire Emblem weaves gameplay and story together. Instead of spelling everything out for you, it trusts the player to put the pieces together themselves. It's subtle, elegant storytelling, and a reminder that even seemingly small details can carry generations of meaning. In the final battle of Guidance Chapter 3, you face off against Tatara, a fanatical cultist who has captured the young mage Delthea. Her mind is under control of the Doom occult, and she's being forced to fight against you. She'll warp around the map and attack your units until Tatara is defeated. Given that her abilities mirror the witches you've encountered before, it's safe to assume that they weren't acting of their own volition either. This adds a bit of horror to the enemies you've been cutting through so far. Alm's been pretty jingoistic, not wanting to spare any sympathy for the enemies. However, the revelation that the witches are likely victims of cultists shows some flaws in Alm's black and white thinking, even if attention isn't really drawn to it. It also speaks volumes about Rigel. The Empire is portrayed as brutal and dehumanizing, with zero regard for the autonomy or well-being of the people. They'll brainwash children, turn civilians into weapons, and treat human lives as disposable if it means furthering their goals. This isn't just a one-off scenario for Gaiden, it's something Kaga revisits throughout the Fire Emblem series. Delthea's situation echoes similar characters like Hardin, Julius, and Merida, who all lose control of themselves due to dark forces or manipulation. It's a recurring theme meant to highlight how war often strips people of their agency. The people swept up in these conflicts aren't villains but victims. They're forced into roles by people in power who only see them as tools. As well, Delthea is a literal child. Not only does the Empire treat child deaths as collateral damage, but they actively abduct kids from their homes and force them onto the battlefield. It's a pretty stark portrayal of how the Empire is willing to weaponize even the most vulnerable. Delthea's behavior on this map reveals Rigel's brutality and the Duba cult's perversion of innocence. Her method of attack harkens back to the witches you fought earlier, exposing them as unwilling victims rather than faceless monsters. In doing so, the game undercuts Alm's rigid good versus evil mindset and lays bare how war robs people of their agency. It's a cool example of a game letting mechanics carry the narrative weight, showing rather than telling how conflict dehumanizes everyone caught in its gears. Having the storytelling and gameplay interconnected makes for a more cohesive experience. The examples discussed in this video show how it can cement a character's place in the world, reinforce character arcs, reveal otherwise obscure information, and bolster a game's themes. Fire Emblem's ability to do this consistently well is one of the things that sets it apart from other game series. I think it's really cool, and I hope future games continue to emphasize it.